Welcome to Navigating the Nervous System. My name is Kristin Boone, licensed therapist, professor, and writer. Do you ever wonder why you do the things you do? The answer might just be your nervous system. Come with me as we explore this incredible system and how it drives your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Let's navigate the nervous system together. Welcome to Navigating the Nervous System. I'm Kristin Boone. This is episode 2, Tiny Tigers. Last week, we talked about the 3 different states of the nervous system: safe, stress, and shutdown. And just to quickly recap those, because we're going to talk about stress and shutdown a lot today. Safe is when our brain is completely integrated and we can be compassionate, we can reason, logic, and physically we're open, we're connected to other people. That is going to be our safe state. When we feel a threat is coming, we tend to move down into either stress or shutdown. Stress being our fight or flight. We either want to tighten up or run away. And so our bodies start to look more tense. We might start speaking more defensively or more short. We have less compassion. We see the other person in the situation or the situation itself as an enemy and become reactive. Shutdown is when we can either kind of give up, we aren't able to process and kind of freeze or dissociate, which means kind of just aren't completely present emotionally. Physically, you might still be there, but you're kind of like just trying to wait for it to be over with. Doesn't feel like you're in your body. And so I had asked you to look throughout your life and see if you can recognize these when someone's in safe and they're connected to others, or they're being creative. If they're in stress and you can tell people are crossing their arms or wrinkling their forehead and just feel a little bit tighter. Or if they're in shutdown and maybe they're not engaging, maybe they're not making eye contact, or their bodies look less energetic. As we move through and become aware of these things, this will help us recognize it in ourselves and help us be able to move back up to safe state as often as possible, because I'm going to introduce you to the idea that when we're in safe, we are in this captain's mindset. We are navigating our ship, which is our body and our nervous system, in a way that moves us through the world in a much better place and sets us up for better communication and relationships and a better life overall. If we're not aware and we live more in our caveman brain, down in stress and shutdown, we're going to be making decisions like a cave person. And I'm not sure that that's how anybody would choose to make their daily decisions that make up their life. So we'll talk a little bit about that captain versus caveman mindset as well. But what I want to start with is talking about these threats that put us into stress or shutdown. I introduced the idea that the reason we have this is because evolutionally, we needed to be able to fight tigers and be prepared to actually physically fight or run away. And that still exists, but more in a social space. And so even though we don't have large tigers anymore, I say we have tiny tigers all day long. And what can help is to learn to name and categorize these tigers, because tiny tigers may not be dangerous in the sense that they'll kill us right away, but our nervous system will react like they do. And some tigers, even if they are tiny, do have more impact than others. So our brains evolved to treat stress as a survival threat. And in order to not act that way, we need to learn how to observe those threats and name them. And then we can do something a little different for each of them. So I'm going to give you 3 types of tiny tigers. The first is going to be real tiny tigers, meaning they have real impact. And those usually fall underneath wealth and health, meaning finances, jobs, health-related concerns. those are legitimate concerns because in our day and age, we don't go out and kill tigers or collect berries. We go to our jobs, we budget our money. And that is what allows us to buy food and survive and have healthy lives. So it's very hard not to consider our physical or mental health as serious threats. So I don't want to minimize these tiny tigers because they are real, or at least have real impact. However, a lot of the way to handle them is going to be better if we're able to stay up in our safe state and use reasoning, connect with others to get support, and make really good decisions about those. And we don't always do that if we're living in our caveman stress or shutdown mode. The second group of tigers I would call relationship tigers. All day long, relationships are very important. And socially, we are a social species. And so we actually do interpret problems with our social relationships also as a survival threat. Because back in the day, if you got kicked out of your tribe or grouping, however we were, you might not be able to survive on your own because we really did need humans as a group, or other Homo sapien related species needed groups to survive in harsh reality. Now, we don't necessarily need people as much. We still need people emotionally speaking, but we're not going to have a physical threat. So we can be a little more choosy about who we let stress us out, right? And so we'll talk about how do we make that decision about important stressors and tiny tigers, and ones that we really just need to let go and move on from. And then the final group of tiny tigers, I call tiger masks. They're not really tigers at all. There's these either social conditioned or just patterns you've fallen into that make you think that an event is important enough to be stressed out about, when really it probably shouldn't. And you can rewire your brain to not react and get triggered quite as badly to what I would just call life, just annoyances of life. Your Starbucks order getting wrong, or someone, making you stop 10 times in front of a stop sign on the way to work. Like, it's annoying, but it really doesn't threaten you. And so being able to name these 3 different categories and treat each of them a little bit differently really can save a lot of time going back and forth from this stress or shutdown back up to safe, and keep you a little more balanced in that safe mode as much as possible. And this is how. So I'm going to work backwards, back up to those important tiny tigers. So first of all, these tiger masks, these things that are not real tigers, it really just takes observation. Being able to step back and recognize, why am I so upset about this? And is it important enough to be upset over? I was just talking to my brother about this because I've shared some of this with him. And he said, yeah, it is nice to be able to recognize, why am I getting so frustrated that this person in front of me is not driving very well? As long as it's not unsafe, it's just annoying that they're, not signaling or something. And being able to be like, that's not important enough for me to waste energy on. Do a little breathing and move on with my life. Because we can get stuck on those people and putting this threat through our heads over and over and ruminating on it and being like, why do people drive like that? And how is this going to help? Can't believe I have to deal with this every morning. That's creating stress in your body and your mind, and it's not helping you stay up in an integrated place where you want to be so that you're in a good mood when you get where you're going. So being able to recognize that the sooner you can and be like, this isn't something I need, to get frustrated about. I'm safe. I talked about this in the last episode. Anything to tell your body you're safe. I'm safe. Take a breath. That person can move on with their day. You don't need to take that stress with you from them. So starting to recognize those tiger masks. Another one might be, thinking that you need to do more than you need to do for some event, and some of this will come from pressure. So example I give for myself is, the holidays can become really stressful because it's like, oh, I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to decorate that and we have to pick up this. And It was funny one year, going to get our tree was a really big thing, but it always ended up kind of hard work and a mess. And one year I just picked one up at the grocery store and shoved it in the back of my car and came home. And it was just such a pleasant surprise. My husband was like, yes, because I had put this giant tiger mask that had to be this, really important event. And really, we had the best time because there wasn't all this stress leading up to actually bringing the tree in and decorating. We can just enjoy ourselves. So sometimes, like, just thinking a little outside of the box and being like, why, if this is so stressful, maybe it doesn't need to be. Maybe this really isn't a tiger. Maybe this isn't a tiny tiger that we need to spend our energy on. And instead, let's do something that gets us to safe mode as soon as possible so we can connect and enjoy each other. So that's the first one, just recognizing what really is a threat and what isn't, or what can you move around a little bit to be a little less threatening. The second one is going to be those relationships, the ones that relationships cause stress. They do. We co-regulate with each other. So obviously connecting is amazing, but there's always going to be protective measures that come up when people trigger us as well. And so how do we decide which of these relationship tiny tigers are important to focus on and which aren't? And I'll give you two ways. One, is the person or the situation worth your time, energy, and stress? Because your annoying neighbor down the street, probably not, right? Your peer at work that you don't have to work with regularly, but they just kind of always say an annoying or offensive thing, probably not. Or it's a simple answer like, I'm just going to tell HR and move on. Okay. Those are the things. The first question is going to be, who is it? Is it worth your time? If it's a family, a friend, your partner, your kids, probably worth maybe thinking a little further. And then going further, what is it we're arguing about, or what's putting me into stress mode? What are they annoying me about? And then ask yourself this question, is it a pattern? Even if it's something they did wrong or something they did annoying, is it a pattern, or is it just a random thing? They did something wrong. They don't normally do it wrong. They're not normally like that. They don't normally say something like that. Move on. Say that's not a tiger. That's just them being a human who did something silly, made a mistake, said the wrong thing. I'm going to move on. If it's a pattern, then yeah, maybe you use your energy to have a conversation once you're up in your safe state. So those ones that are tiny tigers, but they, are in your daily life and the way that you connect with others, is the person important enough and is the conversation important enough? And if not, take some breaths and tell yourself, this is not worth my energy or time. This is just life. This is just people make mistakes. Humans mess up. They say the dumb things. Let's try to move on, save our energy for the important conversations, the important people. And then finally, for the important tiny tigers, the ones that do take time and energy to solve problems. Because if you can do that, you'll have so much more energy to make good decisions about health and wealth and work and finances and child rearing and the important things that do take a little bit more work to keep us safe emotionally, financially, and relationally. So those are the three groups of tiny tigers that as you go through the world, I want you to observe and then decide if it's worth moving forward with. And if it is, again, you need to move yourself up into that safe state before you can deal with it anyway. So that might seem like a lot, but just being able to acknowledge where you are in your nervous system, acknowledge if when you get into stress mode, it's worth being in stress mode for. And even when you do say, yes, this is worth being frustrated, this is a problem to solve, getting back into safe mode before you solve it. That is a really good pattern to start to try to live your life by. And I gave you that tool of breathing to get up into your safe mode. And at the end of the episode, I'll give you another one that you can do in your daily life as well that might help. But part of getting up to your safe mode is just stepping back and being the observer and saying, what is happening and what's the next step forward. And that will kind of just naming it. There's some work by Brené Brown about naming emotions actually can change the way your body chemistry feels about it. Like saying you're nervous about something is going to be very different than saying you're nervous and excited about it. Same thing when you name like, yeah, that's annoying and it's not going to kill me, is going to be a lot different than what is this person in front of me doing? They're driving me crazy, because you're telling your body that it's a threat. You're furthering that threatening feeling. So what is this that we're doing? This stepping back, this observing, this naming, this is what I call the captain mindset. If you instead don't observe, just react, just move into stress and shut down chronically and stay there and make decisions from it, that would be the caveman mindset or the cave person mindset. We want to be a captain. We want to realize that we don't control the water, which I think of as life, and we don't control the storms, these situations or emotions or things that come at us, but we can, to a certain extent, not completely, just a captain can't completely control what happens to the ship, but we can control how to navigate it. And so the captain mindset comes down to three main things, in my opinion. The first one is awareness. A captain's aware of how its ship's running, if it needs anything, where is it going, what direction is it pointed in. So just that awareness and getting to know your body, your brain, and your nervous system, and knowing what you're focusing on, that is the first step. And that's what we're doing here. We're kind of in the middle of this first step. Secondly, we just kind of dabbed into that today a little bit with the tiny tigers, is recognizing what's in and out of your control. Right? What is in my control are the things I do towards my important problems. What out of my control is every little thing humans say and every little thing other humans do. Those are not in my control, right? And we'll talk a little bit more and more about what's in and out of our control when we get to relationships and things like that. But one is awareness. Two is what's in and out of my control. I can't control life. I can't control the storms. I can maybe control steering directly into the storm or not. And that means making a slightly different choice, which means getting to my upstairs safe mode brain and making a good decision. And then the final thing, which I won't get into today, but is don't let other people steer your ship. And we're going to talk about social conditioning, but the peer pressure, or like I was saying, like putting tiger masks on something because, you know, this person over here in this group thinks that's the way you should do it. Now, we can take input from other people, right? A good captain listens and takes advice and asks for help, but they do not let someone else make the final decision on where they're going to steer their ship. So we want that awareness and focus. We want to know what's in and out of our control, because it's a waste of time to focus on the things outside of our control. And then we want to make sure we make the final decisions for ourselves, because we have choice, and with choice comes responsibility. But when you start making those decisions and stepping back and thinking about it, you feel so much better about them, even if they don't go as well, because you don't feel like blaming someone else. You're like, I did think this was the right thing to do. And then there's less chance of regretting it. So just to recap today, not all stress is equal. So don't treat it that way. And don't just drive into storms. Let's start naming these tiny tigers, choosing the problems we need to deal with, and getting up to that safe brain state before we connect with people, before we ask them for help, before we ask them to change things, before we share our feelings, make sure we're in that safe state. And speaking of safe state, I'm going to leave you with one more thing you can do throughout the day that's very simple and easy to help you get up from a stress or a shutdown mode, and that is going to be cold. When our bodies feel cold water, most effectively on our face or neck, it engages what's called the vagus nerve, which is back to polyvagal theory, but you don't have to remember that. And it engages what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest or digest, our relaxing nervous system. It does other things as well, but we'll just call it that for now. Basically tells you you are safe. So putting cold water on your face, on your neck, can engage that and make you feel more calm, make you feel more safe, and get you back up to that safe nervous system state. Now, you might not always be where you can put a bunch of cold water on your neck or your face, but just washing your hands with cold water and maybe touching your hand to your neck or your face and breathing while you do it. You could put this together with box breathing just when you're going to take a restroom break very easily, but cold or drinking cold water, it sends this message that we're safe. Because oftentimes, if you think about it, when we're running, when we're getting ready to fight, we get hot. And so we really want to stay in this safe nervous system state. And cold can help that. So just another tool in your belt to get back into that captain mindset and use some cold water and a breathing exercise and a little 2-minute break might just mean that you make a better decision and categorize that tiny tiger a little bit better. Thank you so much for being here for episode 2, Tiny Tigers. My name is Kristin Cronin-Boone. Thank you for navigating your nervous system with me. Like, subscribe, or follow below so you can get notifications about new episodes. Thank you.